So let's talk about the cardiac cycle and what it actually is. Some of this should be pretty obvious. So diastolic is time, systolic is contraction. These are just root words and what they mean. Angio always means blood vessel, so an angioplasty is when they have to go out and clean a blood vessel. Cardi is usually pertaining to the heart, so pulmon is usually mean lungs, so pulmonary. Inner means in between two areas, so that is going to be like the septum. Myo means middle, and it usually means muscle. Calt means something inserted, and then peri means around. So if we look at the blood, it basically is a double pump, and it helps control blood pressure by increasing or decreasing the heart rate, which makes sense. If it's a pump, if you want to increase heart rate, you're going to go ahead and pump faster. If you're going to decrease it, you're going to pump slower. So with exercise and without. So you could see where the heart would normally sit in with a cadaver, and you could see that a couple things are going on. It's located between the second rib and the fifth intercostal space, and the heart normally sits in a sac, and that's why you kind of see this empty space, and this would be filled with a liquid, and that liquid is designed to make it so when the heart pumps, the heart doesn't have friction and there's nothing really in the way. If we look at the heart itself, it's made up of a couple of parts. There's two atriums. The right atrium and the right ventricle are going to be deoxygenated blood. In the middle of the two, of the right atrium and right ventricle, is going to be called the tricuspid valve. If blood kind of comes in from the atrium, passes the tricuspid valve, and goes into the right ventricle, and is going to go up the pulmonary artery into the pulmonary trunk, and it's going to go to the lungs, come back, and when it comes back from the pulmonaries, we're going to go in to the left atrium. The left atrium is where we're going to go into the bicuspid valve, and then eventually we're going to go into the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, you can see the only path that it can go out is going to be through the aorta, and it's just going to push blood out to the rest of the body or away from the body itself, like away from the head. And you can see that there's these little flaps right here. This is going to be the pulmonary semilunar valve, and this is the aortic semilunar valve, which we'll talk about in lab. So the heart is basically a double pump, and the pulmonary circuit is going to be on the right side because that's basically where we're going to move everything that's deoxygenated and move it back to the lungs to get oxygenated. And once it goes to the lungs and comes back, that's where we're going to call it oxygenated blood. And we're going to move it around the body through the aorta until eventually it goes to cells, drops off oxygen, picks up CO2, and returns back to the heart. In the heart, about 65% of the blood is in the veins right now, working its way back up. And in the other side of the heart, it's going to be the oxygenated part. That's going to be about 35% of blood. And this one is going to be under pressure. This one's going to be just basically using muscle pressure to move back. And we'll talk about that in Unit 2. Blood flow. So basically what happens is we have right atrium to the right ventricle, and granted we smush this heart so you can kind of see it. It doesn't really look like this, it kind of goes this direction, but it will go to the pulmonary trunk and then the pulmonary arteries, and that's where it's going to go ahead and go into the lungs. When it comes out of the pulmonary arteries, we're going to be in the lungs itself. We're going to return back through the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins is going to put you in the left atrium. The left atrium, once we pass that, that's going to be the bicuspid valve, where we're going to go into the left ventricle. Keep in mind this is definitely oxygenated now because it came back from the lungs. We're going to move out of the left ventricle through the aorta, and then eventually go to the aorta. We're going to go to the atrials, eventually to the capillary bed. Through the capillary bed, we'll finally hit the venals, which will become veins when they get bigger, up to the vena cava, and then return back to the heart. You'll need to know the order of how blood flows through the heart. The location of the heart. It's going to be in the thoracic cavity. It's going to be upper area. It's right in the midline to the right side. You'll notice that the lungs sort of have a little notch in them that basically makes room for the heart to pump and do whatever it needs to do. And you'll notice this more in the cadaver when we'll see a little notch right in there. You'll notice that the lungs are covered in this layer, and this layer is going to be called the pericardium, the periparietal, and then the heart is going to be called in a sac itself, and there's going to be a fluid surrounding the lungs, and there's going to be fluid inside the heart itself to keep it from pumping, pumping without friction and keep it moving. The layers of the heart. So we have the pericardial cavity, and what that's going to be is this round sac that's around the heart. It contains fluid for the heart to be floating in and reduces friction. So just imagine that we're in sort of this bag, and let me go back just to kind of show you. Can you see how there's this outer covering around the heart? That's what we're talking about with the pericardial cavity. And what we're talking about here is the pericardial sac. And that basically surrounds the heart. It does this so that the heart is actually floating and it reduces friction when it pumps. Then we have layers of the heart itself. We have epicardium. Remember, cardium means heart. So epicardium is on the outside. Myocardium is the middle layer. And endocardium means inside, and that's going to be a smooth layer. It's going to have a lining so blood doesn't diffuse into the heart. It actually keeps some friction, so it keeps moving around. Epi always means outside, myo means middle, and endo means inside. So epi means out, myo means middle, endo means sort of inside. So, and cardium means heart. So the pericardial sac, which we talked about, is a round area, sort of like a water balloon that has the heart inside of it, and it's designed to reduce friction and make it so anything that pokes it around it won't actually reduce the heart from pumping and things like that. Then there's a visceral pericardium. That's a membrane on the surface of the heart. Then there's parietal pericardium, and that's going to be a layer that's going to be on sort of on the epicardium range. There's going to be a fibrous pericardium that's on the outermost layer, and it's kind of a tough layer. It's going to hold the heart in place. And then there's a pericardial cavity, and that's just going to be where the heart is. And there's going to be that serous fluid. That serous fluid is what is in the pericardial sac and makes it so it can pump and do what it needs to. The myocardium is that middle layer, and that is going to be contracting and moving around. It's the thickest layer of the heart. It's going to be thicker on the left side, and the reason why it's thicker on the left side is because we have to use this muscle to push out the aorta and move it through the rest of the body. The endocardium attaches, remember the endo means inside, attaches to the myocardium. It lines the heart. It's designed to be smooth, so it reduces friction, and it allows blood flow. Those are the layers of the heart, and you'll actually make a lot more sense when we cut through the heart and check them out. Valves. These valves are flaps on the heart, and they basically make it so blood can push through this way and open through the valve. So this is kind of like the tricuspid valve. And then when blood is no longer pushing through one direction, it sort of comes back, and that backflow makes it so these valves open back up like a parachute, and it prevents it from coming down the chamber. So it goes up, And then when it's time for it to come back, just coming back, the heart volume, the heart liquid itself will open up these little parachute-like flaps and make it so blood can't leak through. And that's what's going to give it pressure. If we didn't have this, or we had a leaky valve, the blood would leak through and we'd start to see reduced blood pressure. So we have the atrioventricular valve. They're going to be found between the atria and the ventricles, and they're basically going to be our, we have a couple. We have a tricuspid valve that's going to be between the atrium and the ventricle. And then we have a bicuspid valve, and that's going to be near the left atrium and left ventricle. And how I remember these is tricuspid and bicuspid. Tri before you buy, and if you think about it with pants or something, you try pants on before you buy them. And I think about first will be deoxygenated blood coming through, and then oxygenated blood, and then it leaves the heart. The bicuspid valve is also called the mitral valve, but I like to call it bicuspid. It sort of helps. You'll see that the valves open and close because of these little stringy structures, and they're going to be called chordae tendineae, and they connect the tissues, and they kind of help the valves open and close because of some electrical current that we'll talk about soon. So again, the valves are going to open because they're pushed on because of some pressure, and then when there's some backflow, they're basically going to close up. The reason that these open up is there's these little muscles right over here. They're called papillary muscles, and they're pulling on these little cords. They're called chordae tendineae, and that's what controls these flaps from opening and closing. So an electrical current that we'll talk about later will come through. It'll make it so these papillary muscles contract. That will make it so the chordae tendineae pull on the valve, and it's going to make blood come in. As soon as that electrical current goes away, the muscles contract again, and then we go ahead and have this situation where the flaps are closed, and now the blood is sort of stuck in this area. And this prevents backflow. If we didn't do this, blood would flow back up into the atriums, and we wouldn't be able to maintain that pressure. We also have these semilunar valves, and we're going to have one in the aorta and one in the pulmonaries. And basically what happens is when we push blood out of the ventricles, we want them to go in one direction, and again, it prevents backflow. So blood can go one direction, but then can't backflow and get stuck over here. And if we look at what the cardiac muscle looks like itself, you'll see it looks very different. There's a lot more mitochondria around, there's more nuclei, and they're stuck together with these intercostellated discs. And this prevents muscles from sort of tearing. If these muscles tore, you can't rest your muscles, your heart muscles, where your skeletal muscle, you can kind of give it a break for a day or so. They are, if we look at them, they're short, thick branches of cells. They have those T-tubules that are large, so they can control larger area. The intercostal discs are just, decide to hold them together. They do have gap junctions, and that makes it so cytoplasm can move from cell to cell, so that there's always going to be ion exchange and glucose exchange. Cardiac muscle basically is definitely an area that uses a lot of oxygen, and it's susceptible to oxygen being deprived of it, so it always gives itself blood first, and then everything else is sort of second.